No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live, episode number 176. I want to start today slightly differently because it's important to me that I thank you. When GB News gave into dark establishment forces, the MSM really thought they'd done it right. Cancel me for wrongthink. But as you know, because you are here, this is a new era. The MSM is dead. Independence is everything now. And I am absolutely shocked and touched. And as I say, it's all down to you to say that Outspoken has just hit 100 million views on YouTube alone, which means we are thrashing the fake news agents, thrashing the rest of politics, thrashing Unheard and the Spectator TV. I am coming for you. So this is my little war cry back to those dark forces, and also my promise to you that the time for silence is over. So you can hear me roar 100 million roars for you, for all of us. Thank you for getting me here.
GB News announcing that they are suspending Dan Wootton.
The presenter Dan Wootton.
Dan Wootton
Has been suspended. All eyes are on Ofcom.
Clear infringement of broadcasting rules.
suspended by the channel.
Dan's absence tonight is also beyond my control.
Now, where was I?
Before I was so rudely interrupted. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. This is Outspoken Live. Let's go.
We are up against the potential end of Western civilization if we don't fight against this ideology.
I want to ensure that politicians like myself give voice so the silent majority do not feel that they're being ignored, and that will only breed more discontent, more disturbances in our country.
My complete cancellation in the mainstream media is no coincidence, by the way.
I've got nothing left to hide.
I believe Farage will be Prime Minister in 2029.
I've been saying it for a while, Dan, and some of my friends think I should be taken away in a straitjacket.
I survived cancellation because I simply refuse to be cancelled.
The royal family owes it to the public to clear up any doubts about anybody in the line of succession. Meghan's really crazed behaviour.
It was a serious possibility that you could be arrested if you stayed in the UK.
Either I'll be arrested at the airport or that I'll be stabbed in the street. I genuinely believe that Islam is dangerous. I don't think it's compatible with the West.
Somebody said to me, he had a verbal fight with Meghan and said, you know, why don't you go out and earn some money?
We are fighting to take our country back. This is the opposition now. I represent you, the silenced majority. All I can do is say thank you. Thank you for getting me here. Please hit subscribe. We are so close to 300,000 of you, and join the revolution by signing up to my Substack too. That is a total free speech platform. You can do it completely for free to www.outspoken.live. Thank you again from the bottom of my heart. But now, on with this show, on with the news. That is what you're here for. The UK political establishment and MSM looks increasingly ridiculous as we come on air, as Trump's strong-arm tactics have proven to be central to securing peace. But still, our dying legacy media, like these newspapers, think it's a good idea to attack JD Vance on a complete lie. And the British Bashing Corporation and LBC have been particularly grim.
Ignorant, obnoxious, dishonest.
That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
Vance plays a particularly unpleasant hand when it comes to these islands, when it comes to the United Kingdom. I've got no idea why.
And if you're wondering what the hell has happened to James O'Brien's face, I'll tell you in just a moment. At least Alison Pearson and Katie Hopkins are spitting facts.
British people have been sold the idea, oh, isn't Zelensky brave? Oh, look at him in his camo gear. Oh, look at him on the front line. This is him in his bunker. Isn't he brave fighting alongside his troops? I will just call out, Trump's bravery kind of gets rode roughshod over in the UK because there's just mocking or putting down by the mainstream media.
Analysis you won't get from the mainstream media in my digest next. Then my superstar panel weigh-in. You saw him in our little celebratory trailer. He's been here from day one. Father Calvin Robinson. And joining us for the first time, Thomas Corbett-Dillon, the political consultant, British of course, but now in Washington, D.C., also a Fox News commentator. Also coming up on the show today, Newsnight host Victoria Derbyshire is humiliated for anti-MAGA bias. We'll show you the astonishing and actually quite hilarious BBC bust-up. And Darren Grimes is to run for Reform UK after leaving GB News. We'll reveal the shocking exodus from the so-called free speech channel. Then we have a very special uncancelled after show today. Our premiere went so well yesterday that we're going to do it once more on YouTube today as well as Substack. So if you just hang around after the main show, we will be going live on Substack and YouTube for one day only at 6:15 p.m. UK time. And I promise you, you're not going to want to miss this. Lady Colin Campbell giving her brutal and unflinching verdict on With Love Meghan. Also, before the end of the show, today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass will be named. As ever, you choose the winner of Union Jackass. You can get voting now on our chat on YouTube, but the nominations are Al Green, nominated by Anna Island 17, and that is because he's been known for nothing during his 20 years in Congress, but is now rebranding himself as a stick-waving heckler during the president's address last night, another total waste of US taxpayer money. Sadiq Khan, nominated by It's Only Me 44, and that is because his determination to bankrupt Transport for London by bowing to the unions and allowing tube drivers to retire at 60 on their gold-plated pensions is just the latest in a whole host of scandals. And nominated by Tessa Outlook, Meghan Sussex, she says, as a joke. And that's, of course, because Meghan Markle is now claiming her last name is Sussex. I'll have to ask Lady Colin Campbell about that in the after show. But now, let's go. Overnight, the US President Donald Trump proved that it is his unflinching and brutal approach to negotiations that will end up stopping the war in Ukraine against Russia. A necessary tactic, I believe, to stop the thousands of unnecessary deaths and the willful destruction of Ukraine every single week. As he proved, by the way, last night when the corrupt President Zelensky capitulated to his demands.
Ukraine is ready to sign it at any time that is convenient for you. I appreciate that he sent this letter, just got it a little while ago. Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
And when Elizabeth Warren tried to hijack his address, he simply deployed his famous nickname for the hard-left US politician.
Hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense, with no security, with no anything. Do you want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah, you would say Pocahontas says yes.
So, of course, Trump is succeeding. So the hard left MSM in the UK are now determined to paint him as the warmonger. Can we follow this, folks? Given it is him, Trump, who is quite literally trying to stop the bloodshed, while warmonger Slippery Starmer salivates over British boots on the ground and planes in the air in Ukraine to boost his poll ratings when we can't even protect our own southern border. Alistair Campbell, the man who lied to take the UK into an illegal war, had the cheek today to compare Trump to Castro on the rest of politics.
We're talking Castro levels here, aren't we? We really are. But this all goes into the thing about it's all about me. I mean, any self-respecting politician knows that if there's one thing other politicians can't stand, is having to sit there for a very long time listening to somebody else talk at them. And he went on and on and on and on, loving the drama, loving the theatre, didn't actually say that much that was consequential or newsworthy. And it was pretty tribal, and one of the Democrats got kicked out.
I mean, if there's one man who we should not be listening to when it comes to illegal wars with disastrous consequences, it's Alistair Campbell. I actually find it astonishing that anyone chooses to listen to him. Campbell was soon owned on X after posting about JD Vance. Does this guy do anything apart from check tweets about himself, read press stories about himself, do fake Fox News interviews with softball questions, skiing holidays, and sitting on a sofa trying to pretend to be a Trump believer? Graham Linehan swiftly replied, I tell you one thing he did. He served in the war you started with falsehoods. Lewis Goodall of the fake news agents, that deranged fool, is literally attempting to present black as white to satisfy his Trump derangement syndrome.
This is a Trump plan, actually, to make the war longer. You know, I'm really sick of hearing from sort of MAGA apologists and people, you know, the sort of the White House, people talking about how Trump wants to bring peace. Whether he thinks this will bring peace or not is somewhat beside the point. The only guarantee of this is to make the war longer. Why? Because what Trump has done, John, you just read out that list. What Trump has done in the last 6 weeks is basically remove all of the leverage, the substantial leverage that the United States had over Russia. All of the things that might have brought Putin to the table, right? Trump, the self-styled master negotiator, has basically given away every card he has. And in those circumstances, why would Putin stop the war? The only circumstances now in which Putin would stop the war is if he gets every single thing that he wants, which is clearly completely unacceptable to the Ukrainians, who do have enough arms and European support to fight on. Okay, it might be very difficult, but they will fight on, because what is the alternative in the...
The alternative is peace. Look, you, Lewis Goodall, you're nuts. You've actually lost your mind. Because listen carefully to this question at PMQs today. It was Starmer who refused to rule out war.
To resolve this conflict, but we cannot write a blank check. If British peacekeeping troops in Ukraine were attacked, whether directly or via proxies, we could be drawn into conflict with Russia. Can the Prime Minister reassure all those who are concerned about the UK being drawn into war?
Minister? Yes, that's the last thing anybody wants to see, and the whole point of ensuring that there's a lasting peace and that any deal, if there's a deal, is defended, is to avoid conflict, to ensure that we do have peace. The way to ensure we have peace is to ensure there are guarantees for any deal that is in place, because the surest risk that there would be conflict is if Putin thinks that he can breach any deal that may be arrived at.
Meanwhile, our dying newspapers proved once again that they should be put out of their misery forever as they continue to try and stoke conflict with the US via JD Vance's comments to Sean Hannity, even though the Vice President has made it quite clear, just as I said yesterday, he wasn't talking about the UK or France. Yet the Express, the Daily Express, decided to call him a clown on the front page. The Daily Mirror shamefully labelled him a disgrace. The Daily Star mocked him up as JD Dunce. Oh, and the Record in Scotland parroted their useless First Minister, saying a state visit from Trump was unthinkable. I mean, this is all madness, of course. Total madness. But James O'Brien on the Labour Broadcasting Company was getting in on the act too.
Ignorant, obnoxious, dishonest.
That is a way better security guarantee than 20,000 troops from some random country that hasn't fought a war in 30 or 40 years.
Vance plays a particularly unpleasant hand when it comes to these islands, when it comes to the United Kingdom. I've got no idea why.
Sorry, if you're like me. You couldn't actually concentrate on what James O'Brien was saying there. What the hell has happened to his face? Did someone finally have enough? Well, apparently not, if we're to believe LBC. That poster, James fell off a bike. For anyone wondering, he has not been punched by JD Vance. Ho, ho, ho. So thank God for Britain's best newspaper columnist, one of the only sane media figures, Alison Pearson, who today dismissed Starmer's sabre-rattling over Ukraine as dangerous nonsense. As she wrote in the Daily Telegraph, well, I am a mother. And let me tell you, there is no way I'd let my son sign up for such a foolhardy, open-ended enterprise. Nor would I expect any mother's son to do it, nor any brave soldier either. The last time a British Prime Minister used the phrase coalition of the willing, Tony Blair was trying to persuade us of the merits of invading Iraq. The consequences of that fateful decision are still around, not least in the thousands of Iraqis crossing the channel in small boats. And she concluded, and this is important, there is only one question to put to the British people. Are you willing to let your sons and daughters die for the Donbass? I make that a resounding no. I agree with Alison Pearson. Hell no, slippery Starmer. And don't even think about it until you've stopped the invasion of our country. For reaction, my superstar panel. And I'm delighted to welcome back Father Calvin Robinson, and joining us for the first time from Washington, D.C., the British political consultant, Fox News commentator, Thomas Corbett-Dillon. Calvin Robinson, what on earth are the British mainstream media trying to do? What on earth are they trying to do? Cause some sort of fake fight with JD Vance while backing this deranged march into war, where no one seems to be talking about the fact that over the past few days, this invasion of our southern border is continuing at pace?
I feel like we're living through the Twilight Zone. It's insane to see what's happening over there compared to what's really happening. When we see the video footage of Zelensky getting upset, for example, with JD Vance and President Trump, we all see it firsthand. And then the newspapers in the UK, as well as the lefty rags over here in the US, are painting some parallel universe imagery of it was Donald Trump who upset Zelensky and he wants further war, when actually there's only one person, as far as I can see, who wants peace. That's Donald Trump. And as far as I'm concerned, he's the only one who can get Putin to the table. The one who doesn't want to come to the table is Zelensky. So to see the mainstream media in the UK painting an alternative narrative, including The Express, which is supposed to be a right-wing paper, it's absurd, because what is really happening is that the military-industrial complex, funded and boosted by our establishment, apparently, want to keep this never-ending proxy war going. And it is a money laundering scheme. I'm going to say it a million times. The fact that taxpayer money goes to the Ukraine and then BlackRock gets the money to rebuild the Ukraine, even though it's not yet fully demolished. They're still fighting a war. You don't start rebuilding while you're fighting a war. Anyway, BlackRock gets the money, gets funneled back to British and American politicians. And so it's a great big money laundering scheme. The establishment is a part of it. Our politicians are a massive part of it. But it seems that the mainstream media has a vested interest. All this to protect foreign borders. We had Keir Starmer saying we want to put British troops on the ground, for goodness sake. Not our war, not our soldiers, thank you very much. And you quite rightly pointed out that we can't even protect our own borders. Why are we so invested in protecting the borders of another country, miles and miles away? Well, I'll tell you why. Because of money. It's all to do with money. What we have to look at is the people getting rich from this. Which politicians, which mainstream media entities are making a dime off either selling stories around the war or selling arms to the Ukraine or getting backhanders from companies like BlackRock.
Thomas, so great to have you on Outspoken. Are you shocked when you see the British mainstream media like Lewis Goodall of the fake news agents trying to somehow present Trump as the guy who wants war, when it's actually the opposite of what he's doing?
Well, I mean, just to remind you of how irrelevant these people are, that's actually the first time I've heard from him since I moved to the US.
That's no good one. To know.
I'm like, who is this? I forgot about him. Wow, he's still going. But, you know, and you're right, it was shocking because, you know, I have many friends that are at the White House and they were all, you know, preparing themselves for a pretty tough meeting when Starmer came over. And you know what they were all shocked about? The media. They were like, these journalists are like war hungry.
Yes.
Every question they asked was about troops on the ground. We've got to send troops. And the admin staff were like, this is great. Like, this is easy. We were worried they were going to ask about, you know, for example, the rebuilding of Ukraine that, you know, is happening. There's big opportunity for British business in that. No question was asked about whether the British could be involved in that deal. They don't seem to care too much about British business or, you know, maybe increasing the British GDP, which is in the sort of underwater, as you say. But when it comes to the media, you know what is the real truth of why you see those headlines? They are petrified of JD Vance, petrified. When he stood up in front of those European leaders and gave that speech, they were really scared of him.
Because he's amazing. He's absolutely brilliant. And the other thing, Thomas, which is really worth pointing out, not one British journalist in that Oval Office meeting asked about JD Vance's criticism of free speech. It was an American journalist who had to do it both days. And I just feel that's so shameful. It's almost like the Brits in the mainstream media are just in the tank for Starmer and this administration.
Yeah, it was quite shocking to see. And you know, and it was, again, as I say, these people really are irrelevant. It was the first time I was hearing these voices ever since being over here. And I thought, oh God, they're going, it was, what's his name? Peston stood up and gave some rambling thing. I thought, oh gosh, all the Americans are looking around thinking, who is this guy? Yeah, why do we listen to these people? I don't understand this. Just because they've been doing it for so long, they're like important.
Totally. No, and they are becoming increasingly irrelevant, as you point out. Katie Hopkins has weighed in on the Ukraine war debate, making it clear that she sees Donald Trump as more of a hero than Volodymyr Zelensky, the corrupt Ukrainian president, and slamming the British mainstream media for its biased coverage of the debacle.
British people have been sold the idea, oh, isn't Zelensky brave? Oh, look at him in his camo gear. Oh, look at him on the front line. This is him in his bunker. Isn't he brave fighting alongside his troops? I will just call out Trump's bravery kind of gets rode roughshod over in the UK because there's just mocking or putting down by the mainstream media. Trump has been hunted for 8 years, if not more. He was denied an election, which somebody like me would say he absolutely won in 2020. His family have been utterly persecuted. He's had a mugshot taken. He's been hauled in front of the courts under trumped-up charges. He was assassinated and just barely dodged a bullet. And that happened twice, and yet he's still alive. So I understand this thing you've been sold about Zelensky and his bravery because you've seen him dressed in boots and camo gear. But I would argue Trump and his family have been extremely brave to have the tenacity to still be around to be president right now. After the 8 years he had, you'd think he'd run a million miles, hole up in Mar-a-Lago and simply play golf. Instead, he's choosing to be the president. I think that's very brave indeed.
Father Calvin Robinson, she has a real point, doesn't she? Donald Trump is absolutely a hero. And the presentation in the British mainstream media of him as some sort of scumbag because they all have Trump derangement syndrome, and Zelensky as a wartime hero, completely ignoring the fact, by the way, that there's no real democracy in Ukraine, certainly not at the moment, that he has literally banished lots of his political opponents, that journalists, independent journalists in Ukraine are silenced, is just such a dishonest narrative.
Yeah, I think Thomas is right. It's fear. So what we're seeing with the Donald Trump administration is public service once again. So President Donald Trump doesn't need to be in politics. You know, he's not in to make a buck. He's already made a success of himself. He's not in it to make a name. He's already made a name for himself. He doesn't need anything. He's there to make a difference for the country that he loves. The same with Elon Musk. You know, he came to America, became American, loves this country, and is doing everything he can for the country. Again, he doesn't need to make a name. He doesn't need to make a buck. He's already done those things. And so what that means to the establishment is they have little control over these people. And that is very, very dangerous. That scares the heck out of them because they have no pressure points. There's nothing they can do to make them enact their will. What we're going to see is that Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the administration are going to do what's right for the country. And this America First branding upsets the neocons, the neolibs, it upsets the liberals, it upsets everybody who has vested interests other than the American people. And so it's a change in politics. It truly is.
Okay, before I bring Thomas Corbett-Dillon in on this, let's have a watch of some more of Katie Hopkins, where again, I think she makes the really pertinent point that actually, if Zelensky really is this fearless war hero, why are we treating him like some poor poppet, some wallflower who couldn't take a bit of honest conversation in the Oval Office? Watch.
The next thing is the accusation of bullying. Oh, well, he acted like a bully. Oh, he was a bully. Did you not see JD Vance and Trump? Did you not think they bullied? Can I just say, without apology, it's not a bloody meeting of middle managers at some large public sector organisation. It's not a sort of NHS middle manager meeting where you're supposed to follow the agenda and be polite and listen to Fat Brenda from HR and then bring in someone from accounts to have their perspective and someone adjudicates the meeting very politely. It's not a bloody, ambassador with these Ferrero Rocher, you're really spoiling us. This is a moment of trying to end a war and stop World War III. So if things got a little bit pointed during the meeting, which if you've seen the whole clip, you'll understand better that it wasn't the way that it's been presented to European and British audiences. But I don't even care if it was bullying. If bullying gets her to the point of peace with Ukraine and can stop having taxpayers' cash and my taxpayers' cash sent to Ukraine, I personally think that's a price worth paying. I think it's important, and I think people should stop acting like they're delicate little wallflowers. I thought 1 minute ago you told me Zelensky was very brave and he's in camo and he could fight the good fight. Well, is he really bothered about being bullied a little bit by two other men? I doubt it.
She has a real point there, doesn't she, Thomas? The pearl clutching over some hard truths being discussed in the Oval Office has been quite bonkers, actually. People like Starmer and Badenoch over here are both saying, oh, this should never have happened. And it's almost like that's what you have to say. Why? Isn't it great that we were able to see this democracy in action? And also, if Zelensky really is a war hero, he can cope, right? He can deal with some tough words from Trump and Vance.
Right. And, it is sort of mind-blowing just watching the people over there, really panicking and saying this is outrageous. And I think what it really comes down to is that the people haven't seen a strong leader in so long. They don't know what a strong leader looks like. It was fantastic seeing them holding Zelensky to account. And let's not forget, Zelensky is an actor, and that is true. That can't be changed. That is exactly what he is. That is his background. And that's what he's there for. He was so used to having the red carpet rolled out for him. But, it just reminds us of what weak leaders we have in Europe. I wish that JD could come over and take over the UK for a little while and remind the people of what it's like to actually have someone that cares about the country in charge. I think it comes down to freedom of speech. Even my most conservative friends in England still are so controlled by the media. They believe all of these things. And it is, since moving to the US, I've been able to see so many different viewpoints. And it really does open up the mind to maybe there's different alternatives out there than what the BBC tells you every night at 10 p.m.
Oh my God, yes. Thank God for that. It's interesting, Father Calvin, because Richard Grenell, the special presidential envoy for special missions of the US under Trump, actually said that Meghan Markle is like Britain's Zelensky. And it just reminded me when Thomas was pointing out that Zelensky is an actor. People forget that, don't they? He has played a role very well. Up until this point, everyone has effectively bought his shtick. I don't mean people like you, Calvin, who've been on him right from the start of this war. I mean, I remember you on my GB News show saying the unthinkable just a week after the invasion began. But all of a sudden, he's been called out and people are losing their minds rather than actually thinking, well, there are two sides to this story. And Calvin, you also get, to throw this into the mix too, you get that absolute lunacy that if you say something nuanced or balanced about this war, if you say something bad about Zelensky, you're all of a sudden excusing Putin. So we see the Liberal Democratic Party, for example, saying that Nigel Farage is unapologetically pro-Putin, pro-Musk and pro-Trump, describing him as a plastic patriot. And that's why you can never actually have a proper debate about this stuff.
Yeah, I detest that. As you know, I'm not Nigel Farage's biggest fan, but he is absolutely not a Putin apologist. He's been speaking on this situation long before most of us. There are lots of clips out there of him saying, this is what will happen if NATO keep pushing east. This is what will happen. Russia will eventually retaliate. And of course, what happened? Exactly that. And what we saw last week was actually a bait and switch. Where I agree with Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer is that shouldn't have been in the public eye. That conversation should have been behind closed doors, because Zelensky was there to sign the agreement. He was there to sign something with Trump to say, this is what we're going to do going forward. And instead, he actually had an argument with them on air, trying to put pressure on them in front of the public eye. He tried to use us as leverage, really. And that was beneath him. That was beneath a state politician of his level. But of course, all the lefties are like, well, he's being bullied. How is he being bullied? By being challenged, by having a conversation. It does show how weak our leaders are. It does show how little dialectic there is in current politics. If saying, have you ever said thank you, is seen as bullying, for goodness sake. Imagine having that conversation with children. Have you ever said thank you? Like, that's basic manners. It's basic common decency. If a country's giving you over $100 billion and you're losing half of it, thank you is the very least you could say, to be honest with you.
Totally. Thomas, I'm really interested to know your perspective on what's going on with Nigel Farage at the moment, someone who obviously knows his career well, but from a US perspective, where we've seen Elon Musk actually turn on Farage and say he doesn't think he's strong enough to be the leader of Reform UK. Certainly there has been criticism of Nigel from critical friends, as we describe ourselves, saying that he seems to be tacking to the center, to the middle ground a little bit on these issues. And for example, when it comes to the Ukraine and Russia situation, he has advocated over the past couple of weeks for Ukraine's entry into NATO, which is bizarre because, as Father Calvin says, he was the one who was actually saying it's Ukraine entering NATO that will cause this war. And that's exactly what happened.
Right, and and talking of people that I forgot existed and hadn't heard of, the Liberal Democrats. Wow, you're bringing them up. I thought, wow, are they still going? Gosh,
they are,
but Farage is so Farage is smart, and Elon is also very smart. But Elon exists in the United States. The United States is a very different system to the UK. You have to play a very different game in the UK, which I think Farage is very good at. He's been doing for many years. But my one criticism of Farage, I would say, was sort of highlighted last night in the president's speech to Congress, is that no matter what he does, no matter what the president does, the left are never, ever going to give him credit. They're never going to say he's great. They're never going to say we like him. And British conservatives and people on the right have to stop trying to please the left. They have to stop trying to think that maybe one day the BBC will like them and that these commentators might write a nice piece about them. Who cares? We don't care about these people. They're never going to support us. What we have to do is be really strong, really forceful. And you even see that with the pick of Kemi Badenoch being the leader of the Conservatives. That again is like these members thinking, well, maybe one day they'll like us for being conservative. No, who cares? They picked her because they think that, people will say, oh, we're not racist, like us. No, it has to be brutal. It has to be aggressive. And we have to realize that these people are not like us. They don't think like us. They're crazy leftists. And we are going to save the country regardless of what they say.
Yes, and we have to be able to have the debate as well, because what's going on at the moment is that if you have this debate over Ukraine and Russia, all of the usual suspects, the people who you talk about, the neocons, the mainstream media, the political elites who tend to dominate the mainstream conversation immediately jump to completely incorrect conclusions about your motives or suggest you're a Putin poodle or whatever it happens to be. And Katie Hopkins actually hit back specifically at that trend. Watch.
A small point of information, if I may. I've had many people telling me they don't agree with my support for Trump, with Zelensky and Ukraine, and that on this I'm wrong. I agree with so much of what you say, but on this you're wrong. I completely disagree. You should be ashamed for supporting Trump after the way he spoke to Zelensky. You should be ashamed for your views with Trump. Well, just a couple of points here. When we agree, does that mean we're both right? Okay, so when we disagree, that means you're right, does it, and I'm wrong? So that would mean that you're right 100% of the time. Do you think that's true? The second thing is, if you disagree with someone and then you say, well, I'm unfollowing, does that mean you can only follow people that you agree with? So you're just going to hear points of view that you agree with 100% of the time. And finally, you're saying you're going to lose followers with these views, Katie. No disrespect. I so appreciate everyone's support, but I'm not here for the followers. I'm not here to be liked. I held my views even when I lost everything, was cast out of my own country and wasn't allowed to speak or appear or even really be alive. So if you think I'm in this for the followers, you probably don't know me that well. Maybe you don't know yourself that well. But I will just say, I do hope the door smashes you in the arse on your way out.
And I want to show you guys a really good example of this. Father Calvin, this is this awful columnist for the Mail, Dan Hodges. And look at how he's trying to gaslight people who are questioning this strategy on Ukraine. Can we just be clear? If you don't believe in Starmer's boots on the ground strategy, then you don't believe in security guarantees for Ukraine. And if you don't believe in security guarantees, you don't believe in peace. I'm afraid it's that simple. I mean, it infuriates me, but it's also incredibly intellectually dishonest.
The mental gymnastics. If you don't believe this, then you don't believe that. If you don't believe that, you don't believe that. The only way to get peace is more war, is what he's saying. It's stupid. There's nothing short of stupid in what Dan Hodges is saying. But he's been drinking this Kool-Aid for a long time. I must say, I absolutely love Katie Hopkins. What she said there is spot on. And I see this a lot. You're absolutely right on most things, but on this, you're completely wrong. And I'm going to unfollow you because of this. Or even worse, I'm disappointed in you because of this. Like the emotional blackmail that people put out there. Because all of us, left and right, have so much cognitive dissonance now, and we cannot appreciate difference of opinion. And it disturbs us when someone that we agree with most of the time disagrees with us on something. They must be wrong. Of course, the arrogance of always being right, but also the being triggered by it. We used to have friends from all across the political spectrum and different religions and different ethnicities. And we used to actually have diversity before the obsession with diversity, inclusion, and equity came about. And now we live in our own little cocoons of people that think exactly like us. And the moment they don't, we don't know what to do with it. It's absurd. And it's highlighted especially on social media. I get a lot of that. And I can see exactly what Katie's talking about. But I absolutely love her response in that I'm not here for the likes. If you don't like what I'm saying, fine, unfollow me if that's what you need to do. But I'm here to speak the truth because this is what I believe in. And God bless her for that.
Breaking right now, the British Bashing Corporation has been embarrassingly owned live on air by a MAGA supporter after a ludicrous interview on the broadcaster's flagship Newsnight programme, where Victoria Derbyshire, the host, invited a minor Democratic representative on air, Delia Ramirez, to suggest that Donald Trump is a fascist. So let me take you through this. This was the end of that interview. Watch.
You call him a fascist. You believe that?
I believe that to my core.
Congresswoman Ramirez, thank you very much for talking to us here in the UK.
Thank you.
Let's talk live now to Fred Fleites, who is a former Deputy Assistant to President Trump and also former Chief of Staff of the National Security Council. Thank you very much for speaking.
And Victoria Derbyshire, because she's so used to right-wing politicians, conservatives in this country, just having to take the bullshit from the BBC without fighting back, got an earful when Fred Fleiss, rather than answer her question, called out the British Bashing Corporation for its despicable reporting. Watch.
Who was that you just interviewed?
That is the Democratic Congresswoman for Illinois.
I've never heard of her. So you
what?
put on the most far-left member of Congress you could find to lie to the British people about Trump's successes before you interview me. I honestly have never heard of her.
It doesn't matter whether you've heard of her or not, with respect. She's been voted in by the people of Illinois.
Because the BBC deceives them with people like this from the far left squad. Did you try to find a socialist to put her on the air? I mean, this is the lowest level of journalistic standards I've ever seen.
So, would you expect Donald Trump to announce the signing of this?
You're not going to answer my question? Why did you put her on?
She's a democratically elected congresswoman.
Did you even ask them?
Forgive me,
Did
if I
you
may.
ask the Democratic leadership? They wouldn't have been nearly as crazy as her, who said Trump is a fascist and a dictator. I mean, give me a break. How did you find this person?
Would you like me to answer your question?
Please.
She's a democratically elected congresswoman for Illinois. She will be there when President Trump addresses Congress. We're speaking to a Democrat. We're speaking to a Trump supporter. That is you. Are you expecting...
Yeah, well, I think the British people realize the hypocrisy here. But anyway, jumping to the minerals deal.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Oh my goodness, inject that into my veins. I could watch it all day. Finally, someone calls out the British Bashing Corporation on air. Sadly, it's an American who has to do it. Father Calvin Robinson, Thomas Corbett-Dillon back with me. Thomas, wasn't that just brilliant? Because it's completely true, isn't it? The BBC effectively choose to put a nutcase Democrat on air to virtually unchallenged suggest that Donald Trump is a dictator and a fascist. And it's just totally par for the course, totally run of the mill.
Right. And there's a saying that's been running around DC right now, and it's, we are so back. We are so back. We are not taking this anymore. Everyone is standing up. Everyone on the right of this is saying, we are sick of it. We have had 4 years of this. Actually, we've had 8 years of it, because during Trump's first presidency, they did the same thing. We are taking this back. We are sick of hearing from these leftists that have gripped control of all of these things. You know, a great example you showed earlier, Rory Stewart, right, sits on his stupid podcast talking about how awful America is, how awful President Trump is. We just found out during the audit of USAID, the American taxpayers giving his wife $1 million a year. For him to then sit and talk about how awful America is and what an awful man Trump is. We are sick of these people. They've been doing it for too long, and it's all changing. But, you know, it makes me very sad to then look back at the state of England, because America is winning. They're winning so good. And it's the golden age of America. Meanwhile, the UK, we've got, 5 more years of commie Keir. It's so sad. I don't know how we save the UK, because America is just a rocket ship right now. It feels so good to be in DC. I don't think it feels as good to be in London.
Oh, it doesn't. Trust me. You two have both escaped. I'm here trying to fight against the communist regime. Father Calvin, that was a moment, wasn't it? And actually, it frustrates me. Why do politicians in the UK not take that approach?
Because they're weak, they're feeble, and actually the Conservatives in the UK aren't even Conservative. We've seen in many recent polls that if they were voting in the US election, they would have voted for Kamala Harris, who was a commie, for goodness sake. But I'm hoping that people eventually wake up to what the BBC is doing. We saw that because we're awake to this and we're in the independent media. But many people watch the BBC and think, oh, she said Trump's a fascist. It wasn't challenged, therefore Trump must be a fascist. It's disgusting. The challenge should have been, well, define fascist. Is it someone who's a military dictator who suppresses his political opponents? You know, what is Trump doing that is fascist? He's a democratically elected conservative politician who is enacting conservative policies. There's nothing fascist about that. They use these words to mean something different. The word fascist, the word racist, the word Nazi, all they mean these days is someone I dislike, someone I disagree agree with. It's pathetic. But for the BBC to be pushing this, which is still the major state-funded broadcaster in the UK, is very, very sad. It's unhelpful to our democracy, which they seem to want to protect at all costs.
Will indeed. And I always think, Thomas, we're about maybe 5 years behind America, although things are massively speeding up. And I'd be fascinated to know your take on what's going to happen to the mainstream media, because if you look in the US, right, I mean, CNN, their ratings were down 80% for the inauguration. MSNBC is virtually finished because they haven't reported the truth for so long and people are just switching off. So is there a media revolution happening in America that will, in the end, sort of transfer over to the United Kingdom?
Well, I think the difference, of course, is that in the US media, there's much more of a profit incentive. These people have to make money. So we just saw MSNBC have fired Joy Reid. CNN are shifting everything to try and get back on track. The BBC could not care less if they have one person watching that show at night. They are going to preach what all of the people inside that corporation want to preach because it makes them feel good. And you see it across the media. Whenever I go on, particularly GB News, I'll do my talk from the US and I'll, go about this, that Trump's doing this, Trump's doing that. And then they cut to this leftist that then says, well, he doesn't believe any of that. He's just saying that because, he wants Trump to see it and he's going to like him. It's this pessimistic, it's a sort of uniquely British trait that they sort of are pessimistic and look down on anyone with this sort of intellectual sneering, saying, it's this political class of privately educated sort of fake working class people that seem to be all over British media. These commentators, these people, again, as I said, these people I haven't heard of in the 5 years that I've been here. They mean nothing. And if you go back to the Ukraine war, the UK means nothing. The peace deal is going to be done regardless of what the UK thinks. And I think the British media has very quickly lost its place in the world, which is a real shame.
Yeah, you're so right on that, actually. The profit incentive is a huge thing, and the fact that the BBC continues as this sort of behemoth. But, I am hearing language from Nigel Farage, for example, hopefully the next Prime Minister, saying actually maybe the BBC World Service exists, but there doesn't really need to be a BBC operating in any particular way. You're also right to point out that faux balance, which comes from the government regulator, the Ofcommunists, as I described them, and they are effectively trying to force GB News out of business. And really what GB News did was throw people like me and Father Calvin and Lawrence Fox and Mark Stein under the bus to try and appease that regulator. But of course, that never happens, does it? They just come back for more and more and more. I will show you just a little bit more of Victoria Derbyshire's interview with the Democrat, because in fairness to her, this is Delia Ramirez, in fairness to Victoria Derbyshire, she does challenge her on her false claims, but it's not really the point. It's why the BBC put this woman on air in the first place. Watch.
I mean, what I think for sure, what I do know, in fact, is that we have a president who has demonstrated that he's not a president, he's a dictator, helping support.
Whoa, sorry. I'm just going to pause you on that word. He's a dictator. I mean, obviously, he won the popular vote. He won the Electoral College. So in no way is he a dictator. He's democratically elected by your people.
Democratically elected by people and acting like a dictator. That is exactly what he's doing. He is telling us that Congress and members of Congress are not an equal branch and acting as if he can take over the authority of Congress and do whatever the heck he wants. That's exactly what he's doing, and that's exactly why I called him that.
So she sort of did the bare minimum there, Father Calvin, right?
But I mean, she's still lying. In what way is he acting as a dictator? She needed to push back on that, because legislation is created by Congress, right? By the Senate and the House. And the executive, who is the president, puts forward executive orders and enacts the legislation put forward from the House. So in what way is he a dictator? I don't understand this bizarre rhetoric that the far left keep using. Again, it's just a form of attack. And if they say it often enough, it begins to settle in people's minds and they think, oh yes, he's a dictator. Yes, he's a fascist. Yes, he's a Nazi. It's absurd. We need to get beyond this. And the mainstream media isn't helping. Victoria Derbyshire did push back a little bit. I'll give you that, but not enough. It's just crazy talk and again, why select her? of all the Democratic congressmen that they could have selected, why her? Because they knew that she would say this. They knew she would call him a fascist and a dictator on air. And that is what they wanted. They wanted those words said on air.
Of course. And so the solution, I guess, is twofold, right, Thomas? Firstly, people should stop paying their BBC licence fee in the UK. People power. Father Calvin was advocating for defunding the BBC many years ago. And actually, hundreds of thousands of people are stopping doing that. But the problem is, officially, that means you're not able to watch television whatsoever, which is just insane. So I guess that's the first thing people should do. And then the second thing people should do is switch off. And actually, if people were not watching the BBC, it would be a lot harder for them to ask for that amount of money and, you know, get into that independent media space, because once you're there, it's like opening up another world, isn't it? But I guess you need to be woken up first. Obviously, everyone who's already here is woken up, Thomas.
Right. I mean, I really can't believe that people are actually paying the license fee. Is that people actually pay that? It's crazy.
Yeah, and people are still being sent to jail for not paying it.
It's insane. It's insane. Everything I learn about England is, I'm like, we really put up with that? What is going on over there? But anyway, your question earlier of how did this person get on? I can tell you exactly how the person get on. There's a far left producer at Newsnight that booked that person, knowing full well that was what they were going to say. That was, and the Republican guy made a great point. Why didn't they reach out to Democratic leadership and put on one of the leaders of the Democratic Party that would have, you know, would have loved to go on the BBC? But, you know, they don't want that. They have an objective. They have a bias. So this idea that the BBC is impartial is a complete lie. I mean, when was the last time they put Marjorie Taylor Greene on that show? You would argue that woman is the Democrat they had on is very far left. She's probably as you know, the alternative on the other side. They don't put her on. They would never put her on. So, you know, it is a shame that the BBC has fallen to such lows. It did used to be quite a good organization one day, but you're right. The independent media, although the UK struggles because don't they just lock you up if you tweet something you don't agree with?
Well,
you know,
indeed.
I'm so happy to be here.
Indeed, and I mean,
I'm
even
happy to be here.
Yeah, you should be. I mean, I'm very
I've got
jealous.
my freedom. If I tweet here, they can't put me in jail. If I tweet it from English soil, I can go to jail. It's outrageous.
It is, and even Alison Pearson, you know, the woman who I believe is the best mainstream media newspaper columnist in the UK, had a knock on her door from the Essex Police over a post on X. It is utterly insane. Stand by, Father Calvin Robinson and Thomas Corbett-Dillon, because we have much more from our superstar panel, including big news. Darren Grimes has just left GB News. Where is he going? You're going to be absolutely fascinated. I will tell you in just 1 minute, so don't go anywhere. But first, do you know that sleeping less than 6 hours per night doubles the risk of early death? Poor sleep is also linked to obesity, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, depression, and a weakened immune system. Now, I've got to admit I've struggled with my sleep for quite a while. I've tried everything, but found it difficult to wind down and get to bed before 2 a.m. And I'm not alone. The CDC reports over 35% of adults in the US sleep less than the recommended 7 hours. Many sleep supplements contain melatonin and other ingredients that create dependencies, cause morning grogginess, and lose their effectiveness over time. So that's why I've started taking Evening Bean, which is a brand new product by Verso. After 3 years of perfecting the formula, they created a melatonin-free drink mix with clinically studied, patented ingredients. It's formulated to calm an active mind, help you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and improve deep and REM sleep, all without creating dependencies or causing morning grogginess. I look forward to drinking Evening Bean every night, not only because it helps me fall asleep faster without having to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and wake up much easier, but because it tastes so good too. It's become my new nightcap, and it's great if you're vegan or keto too. So click the link in the show description or head on over to evening.ver.so/outspoken. Use the coupon code outspoken at checkout to save 15% on your first order. Try Evening Bean tonight and wake up feeling refreshed tomorrow. That's evening.ver.so/outspoken and use the coupon code outspoken at checkout to save 15%. But now, back to the show. Breaking right now, GB News is coming under increased scrutiny after a tsunami of departures from the so-called free speech channel as they crack down on its presenters' free speech. The latest out the door, Darren Grimes, has just revealed exclusively on Substack that he is joining, or that he has joined Reform UK, but is now intending to stand for election for the party, initially as a councillor in his home seat, which is, of course, in County Durham. But it follows a very emotional departure video on air, which had many scratching their head as to what is really going on and whether this broadcaster has simply capitulated to the government regulator, the Ofcommunists. Watch.
Head on, we've laughed at the absurdities of modern Britain and we've stood firm. Don't do it. Stop it. In the absurdities of modern Britain and a belief that common sense still matters. And it's been an honour. And I want to express my deep gratitude to this production team, the panel, and my colleagues, and above all, to you at home.
Do you want me to read it?
You can do it. You can do no. He can do this. The people that have tuned in, engaged, and made this journey totally worthwhile. I'm off to pursue personal projects, but the fight for free speech, for common sense, and for truth, it goes on and it must. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching, for supporting, and for standing up for values that matter.
Now, Darren Grimes will actually be here on Outspoken for his first interview about the departure next week. However, it was really interesting that he was actually given the opportunity to say goodbye, as Alex Phillips has previously revealed on Outspoken. Usually people who are booted are just kicked out of the building, never allowed back again. Now, Karen Hankey, who helps run the Dan Wootton Outspoken Club on X, has put together a list of all of GB News' high-profile departures, and it really is quite something. Let's run through it. All gone, she starts. Mark Stein, Kirsty Gallagher, Andrew Neil, Colin Brazier, Alex Phillips, Simon McCoy, Darren McCaffrey, Anaya Falora Naman, Gito Harry, Daisy McAndrew, Dominic Frisby, Rachel Sweeney, Rosie Wright, Mercy Maroki, Dahana Davidson, Becca Hudson, Isabel Oakshott, Paul Hawkins, Father Calvin Robinson, Lawrence Fox, Rhiannon Jones, Mark Longhurst, Arlene Foster, Pip Thompson, Dan Wootton, Liam Halligan, Ray Addison, Polly Middlehurst, Albiam Ancona, Esther McVeigh, Philip Davies, Alison Pearson, Andrew Doyle, Mark Dolan, Isabel Webster, Stephen Wolfe, Will Hollis, and now Darren Grimes. Extraordinary for a channel that has only been on air for 3 years. Let me bring in my superstar panel now, formerly of the GB News parish, Father Calvin Robinson, and the political consultant and Fox News contributor, Thomas Corbett-Dillon. So, Father Calvin, it is truly astonishing, isn't it, when you look at that long list of departures. What do you think that's about? And Darren Grimes' departure, your verdict on that?
The list was funny. I thought you got to the end and it kept going on. Or nearly 40 names in like 3 years. It's ridiculous. Not to forget that they've lost £110 million in those 3 years as well. And by the end of this year, they'll have lost £140 million. It's not a good business at all. In regards to why so many losses of on-screen talent, well, I think it's because it's just a poorly run organization, really. There has always been a divide at GB News. There were those of us who believed in the mission, and there were people that just wanted to do television. And those two things didn't always, sometimes they worked, but they didn't always work in tandem. For example, there were many lefty, liberal producers and people behind the scenes who hated the presenters, hated the people they worked for, and tried to undermine them at every step of the way. And that just can't work. You know, I remember saying to the CEO right at the beginning of GB News that, look, the best thing you could do is hire people with the ideology, you know, people that believe in free speech, first and foremost, and then train them up with the skills and talents they need to do television. Instead, what they did is they hired straight out of the BBC, straight out of Sky News, straight out of university with a horrible woke left-wing ideology. So they hated everything we were doing, and they had the skills and talents they needed, but they didn't have the ideology. So it fell apart, and we've had this internal battle ever since. And this is what ended up with people like me and you leaving, I believe. With Darren, Darren got shafted before us, actually. He got fired before us over a scandal that turned out to be untrue. But the way he was treated was abysmal. And if that video you just played where he's crying on air, I know it's Darren, bless him. But this is because he's always wanted to do this. This has been his dream job, and he's loved it. But they've treated him like crap every step of the way. Even after coming back, they stifle what you can say, what you can talk about, who you can talk to. And it makes it impossible. So I'm not surprised that he's left, and he's going to do his independent media, Darren Grimes Unleashed, which will be great because he was great on Unreasoned. He's always done good media work. He was with me at Defund the BBC way back when. I am surprised to hear that he's standing for reform in the local elections. That'll be interesting to see what happens there, and if he goes forward for parliamentary elections afterwards. He's got a profile. He could do, could make a bit of an impact there. That would be interesting to see. I didn't have him down as a politician, but goodwill to him. I wish him the best. I really do. I don't wish GB News the best. I'm interested to see what happens as they implode, as they further pummel money into it that they cannot sustain. And I mean, we were looking at the roster the other day. I saw the main figureheads of the station on their new poster. I was like, really? That's all they've got left? Oh, it's bad. It's very bad. Bless them.
Thomas Corbett-Dillon, how do you look at it from a perch in America, but knowing the British media as you do? Do you feel like GB News has capitulated and given in to the off-communist government censor? Because certainly, as someone who was there from day one, the change to the output has been astonishing. And I used to obviously come on air and I'd have my nicknames, Slippery Starmer and Fishy Rishi, and the presenters are told now they can't do anything like that. They want to be very kind to Labour and very kind to Starmer, and it feels like the Ofcom, I guess, very tough strategy with them has worked.
Right. I mean, to me, that list looks like a great party invite. Every one of those names on there, they're all great people. That's a party I'd like to go to. And more than that, they all sound to me like future members of parliament. This is how we win. This is how we take over. And I like that Darren is hopefully, stepping into being a councillor first, and then I assume going into parliament, because this is what we need. And if I can just put my American hat on for a moment and remind the English people that what these people need is money. Please, if you can, go to Darren's website or wherever he has and donate to him, because the establishment have so much money, Labour has so much money, and for these young guys to take over, which is what we're trying to do, you have to support them, and it's small pound amounts that make a big difference. So if we can get him into parliament, he would be a fantastic politician, as would every one of the people on that list. So, I think it is important that these things are changing. But it's crazy to me that, there's a body that regulates the media and what you can say. That doesn't sound very free speech. I saw Starmer in the Oval Office pushing back on JD, saying we have free speech in our country, and we've had absolute rubbish. You cannot say what you want to say, or this organization, no one knows who they are. Who is even running Ofcom? Who is behind the scenes at Ofcom? They're going to come in and get you banned and all this. It's outrageous.
Yeah, and I think it's a very good point you make, by the way, about supporting people like Darren. Of course, it's really, really difficult. My advice to everyone has been, get rid of your BBC license fee, and the money that you have from that can be used to support the independent media organizations that you want to see thrive. But Darren outlined his pitch. And actually, I think a big part of it is really important, because he's obviously a proud Geordie, right? And how ludicrous that he was forced by GB News, a company that claimed to be all about representing people outside of London, but he was forced every week to travel to London in order to broadcast. So the great thing about his new project is that it's all going to be based from Newcastle, and this is how he pitched it.
That's why we have to fight back. It's why we have to stand up. We haven't got time to be pussyfooting around, censored either by politicians or by the likes of regulators like Ofcom. It's why I'm going independent, and it's why I need your support like never before. I've known cancellation before. Hell, I've been cancelled more times than certain iterations of the Sugar Babes. But I'm going independent in order, well, I'm cancelling myself at this juncture. But that independence allows me to give you what you need, to give this country what it needs, which quite frankly is a kick up the arse.
And that is such an important point, isn't it, Father Calvin? Like, it's not just about supporting a media organisation, an independent media organisation for the sake of it. It's about that ability to change, because trust me, there was no way that the MAGA revolution would have happened if Americans had still been relying on the mainstream media. And I think what Trump realised, because obviously he needed a huge victory in 2024, he needed a popular vote victory in order to do everything that he wanted to do with a strong moral justification. He created really an independent network of the MAGA movement that sat outside the Republican Party. It's so important. And I was listening to an interview with our friend Meghan Kelly the other day, and she gave on stage with Semaphore Media, and actually she wasn't very happy with the interview and the tone of the questions and everything, which were all quite negative. But her statistics, Calvin, are just astonishing. Last month, I think it was January, Meghan Kelly, one woman, got nearly as many views on YouTube than CNN, a 24-hour news network with a budget of billions. It's extraordinary.
But I'm not surprised at all, because Meghan Kelly is fantastic. But you're absolutely right that President Donald Trump tapped into this idea that we have to move beyond the establishment, because the establishment control the narrative, whether in the UK with Ofcom or in the US with CNBC, MSNBC, all the CNN, all these horrible networks that have been pummeling their own message, their Soros-funded message for so long. And so what he did is he worked with teams like Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA, great on the ground. He worked with independent media outlets. Many of them have been in the White House now as part of the press corps, which is fantastic. Again, get the BBC out of there, get CNN out of there, get some independent journalists in there that actually have a decent audience, unlike these mainstream outlets now. And so we're seeing a tide shift, and it's very purposeful here in the US, because President Trump is a very smart man. He gets this. He gets that we're moving away from newspapers and television, and we're moving towards internet, independent media, and they have a whole different audience. And this is one of the reasons he managed to win so magnificently, in that he worked with people on the ground with different audiences to get his voice heard. This is what we need in the UK. Unfortunately, it's more difficult in the UK because, of course, Ofcom are monitoring the airwaves, but also they're going to be monitoring the internet very soon. And so even free and independent networks in the UK are going to have Ofcom regulation. It's almost like we have to move outside of the UK, like Thomas and I have done, in order to have a voice. I'm hoping and praying that your voice doesn't get silenced at some point, Dan, because they are overreaching, and they know that their power is slipping away. And so they're grasping at straws to hold onto it for as long as possible. And I know you'll fight against that. And there are many other people, Mahir Tusi and people like that, will fight against it. But you shouldn't have to fight to have a free
The Lotus
press.
Eaters too, obviously, where you have your
Lotus,
common sense.
Lotus Eaters are fantastic.
Yeah, but you're completely right, because what these people want to do, what the off-communists want to do, is they want to regulate the internet. Now, that's one of the reasons why I support Donald Trump and JD Vance so strongly. A lot of people ask me why, and it's like, literally, if Kamala Harris was in the White House, her and Keir Starmer at the moment would be stitching up every big media company, every big tech company, in order to force regulation. Now, Thomas, look, obviously it might be quite cringeworthy seeing people like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg do a total 180 and bend the knee to Donald Trump. But I don't care, because if it means that their platforms move towards free speech, then all I can say is thank God. And Labour in this country, and Slippery Starmer with his censorship and empowering people like the off-communists, it is so out of step with what is going on in America. So I guess what's happening in America keeps allows me to keep the faith, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think there is hope. I can't believe that they're trying to regulate shows like yours. That's crazy. I didn't realize they were starting to do that. But, there is a enshrined freedom of speech in this country that the UK does not have. And you're right, it was great to see Zuckerberg and Bezos up there at the inauguration. And, I think to give them a little bit of credit, their hands were tied when they were forced to do those censorship things. They had FBI teams embedded into their teams and all this stuff. So it was a hard world for them to manage. But now they're very happy to be free. We saw Bezos has just kicked out the opinion editor of the Washington Post and said he needs to talk about American values. And so the Washington Post is suddenly joining the team. So the media world is changing. I think the UK has to catch up. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, look, it has been so great to have you on for the first time. Thomas Corbett-Dillon, who is, of course, a British political consultant and Fox News contributor now based out of Washington, D.C., and Father Calvin Robinson from day one. Always love having you. We will speak next week. Thank you both so much. Now, in just 5 minutes, by the way, let me tell you what we're going to do. Very special uncancelled after show today with Lady Colin Campbell giving her brutal verdict on With Love Meghan. So we are going to be broadcasting it live on YouTube. All you need to do is stick here, and in 5 minutes' time, that show will begin. Of course, you can watch on Substack as normal, www.outspoken.live, but it's a special edition today. We're going to give you a taste, a flavour of what you usually get from the after show with our royal coverage from Lady Colin Campbell. So that is coming up in just 5 minutes. So before we get to that, we've got to do our greatest Britain and Union Jackass. So your nominees today were Al Green, and he was nominated by Anna Ireland for doing nothing during his 20 years in Congress and now rebranding himself as a stick-waving heckler during the president's address last night. Another total waste of taxpayer money. Sadiq Khan, nominated by It's Only Me, 44, and that is because of his determination to bankrupt TfL by bowing to unions allowing tube drivers to retire at 60 on their gold-plated pensions. And Tessa Outlook nominated Meghan Sussex, or the woman that we call Meghan Markle, for claiming her last name is now Sussex. Well, the results are in, and with 22%, in third place, still quite a lot of you backing her though, Meghan Markle. In 26%, Al Green for heckling Trump. But over half of you, 52%, have made Sadiq Khan your Union Jackass this Wednesday for destroying TfL. Greatest Britain time now, and this is so brilliant. Nominated by London Snow 251, GB Farmers, all of those who came to London yesterday, good on you. Now, stand by because we have Lady Colin Campbell coming up in just 3 minutes. First, though, I want to show you just the highlights of our discussion on With Love Meghan on yesterday's after show. With Love Meghan, this is the worst TV series, the truth behind Meg's latest tissues of lies, now known as Meghan Sussex.
You know I'm Sussex now. It's just one of those PR things. This was clearly a pap walk.
Her so-called BFF, Daniel Martin, he is totally subservient to her, a complete enabler. Sam Markle, Meghan slagging off your father again, dig after dig at your amazing dad.
Yeah, hanging out at ABC TV at studios is really depressing.
It's the victim mentality again.
The whole putting things back together. You mean like the hearts that you've broken? Dad's heart, Queen Elizabeth II's heart.
If Meghan does not add the royals into this, no one's going to care.
Prince Harry enters the scene.
He was supposed to come in, look very positive. Usually nowadays he looks very, very miserable.
Oh, that was such good fun. You can watch that later, but stick around here because in just 1 minute, Lady Colin Campbell is up. I promise to keep fighting for you. See you tomorrow at 5 UK time.